Howdy, and welcome to the Highline Herd podcast, where stories ride strong and the bond between folks and their horses runs deep. Each Sunday, we're talking everything from trail tips and tack to good old horse sense and the people who live it every day. Keep up with the herd by following us over on Instagram at the Highline Herd and swinging by our website at thehighlineherd.com. Now, let's ride into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Highline Herd. I'm Skylar.
I'm Shelby, and we've got a little bit different of an episode today. So, I know in the past we've been talking about kind of just general horse care and all of that. But today we're going to talk about something more behavioral, more training based. Now, a quick disclaimer before we dive into this. One, we are by no means behavioralist experts, nor are we claiming to be. We are speaking through this episode from our own experiences, what we've seen, and our own opinions, which is what you're all here to hear, right? Yes, you want to hear some of the informational stuff that we've, gathered a bunch of research on, but you also, are here to hear kind of our thoughts about things, because what is the horse industry except an amalgamation of opinions? Yeah. So, horses, opinions, and people.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what we're covering in this episode. So, we talked a little bit about Mustangs, and then we talked a little bit about handling youngsters. So this episode is going to be about consent and horses. So this is kind of a hotter topic because, we're in kind of a point where nobody's quite sure what qualifies as abuse or what's cruel. I am a firm believer, and I believe Skylar is as well. There are very, very few tools out there that are inherently cruel or designed to cause pain.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean there aren't any, but majority that is not their intended purpose.
Yeah.
So in today's episode, we're talking about consent in horses. We're going to cover what that looks like, how it's applicable, kind of how it all goes together, because I see some people take it a little too far and some people who don't do enough. So, first off, can horses always have a say? No, unfortunately not. For some people, they are still a livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes that horse has to go to work, but that's also where, a lot of good horse people, I can say with pretty confidently, I can say most horse people nowadays do not choose a horse for a job that doesn't enjoy the job.
Yeah, most of the time you'll see, and with good horsemanship too, you'll see people, if they're trying to do something with a horse that doesn't enjoy it, they'll either stop doing said thing, or they'll try to find other things that the horse enjoys to kind of supplement that.
Right. So, sometimes we can apply it, sometimes we can't. When you're going out and you have to get cattle in, you have to gather cattle, you have to sort it, you have to rope.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, consent, human or equine, doesn't exist because things have to be done.
It's a job.
Yeah, just like we go to work every day, that horse has to work every day. No, it doesn't mean it's not applicable to that situation. So your application of it's just going to look a little bit different. So, when I say, your application's going to look a little bit different, let's be honest, you don't always have to go out and use a horse to round up cattle. So if you see your horse is kind of having an off day and needs kind of just some them time where they're really just not vibing, and you really don't have a whole lot to do, you could say, okay, I hear your no, and we're going to do something else. Or I see this all the time. And this is also where wording and viewing comes into play. People are like, oh yeah, my horse doesn't like blankets or fly masks, so we just don't put them on. Okay, you're acknowledging your horse's no, whether you want to see that as consent or not. Your horse did not consent. It is, yeah. So your horse said he doesn't like masks or sheets, and you have never tried to do it again. That is you acknowledging your horse's no and listening. But, there are cases where sometimes they have to wear a mask, or they have to wear a sheet, or they have to have some kind of medical care done. So, just as much as we want to respect their no's, we also sometimes have to force them.
Yes.
And, we don't like doing that, but that's the nature of it. So when you're working with horses and you're talking about consent with horses, it's really about weighing what is most important, what is the priority, and what can be kind of pushed to the side. So fine example is when you're working with Mustangs, you have to find their threshold. Where can you push? Where can you... So, yeah, when, consent is applicable in some cases, and when you're dealing with Mustangs, it can be especially applicable. Do you want to kind of share how that's been going with Sunny?
Yeah. A lot of what I've done with Sunny has been checking in. So in a way, it's its own form of consent, even if most people don't view it that way. I will go in when I'm working with him, or just from the beginning of us meeting, and I would do something that would get a reaction out of him, and he could either tell me with his body language, okay, that's fine, or no, that's not okay. And once we kind of did that weird tiptoeing like balance of figuring out what was no and what was yes.
Yeah, finding everybody's threshold and boundaries and all of that.
Yeah, then everything was okay. And that established our first line of communication of what is acceptable and what is not. That also plays into now that he is more used to humans and the days, the daily goings of a barn and the other horses. I can do things around him, new things around him, and see where he's at mentally and figure out, okay, can I push this or is this too much? That's kind of where I gauge the consent aspect with Sunny specifically.
Yeah, because it's absolutely possible, just like people, if Sunny says, hey, here's my boundary, I'm not willing to fly spray right now, and you force him to deal with it, you can snowball and make that situation worse.
Exactly. And that's actually something that we're doing right now. We're working on him accepting fly spray. He doesn't care about the sound. He doesn't care about the bottle. It's the aspect of it landing on his skin that he does not like, which is totally understandable. It's a new sensation. It's a new feeling. And it's a dance that you have to play, and not doing it too much because you don't want to sour him. In that scenario, you don't want to sour him to something like that, like water, spraying him down with water, etc. And it's just a dance you got to play to try to figure out, okay, that was too much for you in this circumstance. Take a step back and kind of go from the beginning again.
Yeah, and, that's what you're going to find working with all horses. Mustangs, youngsters, oldsters, because I've met horses where their no, that hard no, is something as simple as fly spray or a fly mask or picking up, one of their feet. And if you continue to force the issue, like you said, right, they get soured so fast.
Exactly.
And then you can wind up with an even bigger problem than if you had just said, I hear your boundary, we're not doing that.
Yeah. Or I'll focus on something else that needs to be worked on with Sunny. And it's so easy to distract him too. Like to focus on something else in transition, that we don't really have an issue of a hard no. But again, I respect him when he tells me, like, I really can't do this right now.
Right. And you have to, because a lot of circumstances I see where horses do start rearing, start bucking, start bolting, comes out of them telling their humans, hey, I'm uncomfortable, like, I don't like this. If this keeps going the direction it is, something's gotta give.
Yeah.
And more often than not, what gives? The horse, and they're prey animals. They just want to get away. So yeah, they're gonna rear, buck, bolt, whatever they need to do to get away.
Yeah, and usually that's the situations you'll see somebody getting hurt or the animal itself getting hurt, which is the last thing anybody wants.
No one wants more vet bills. So, when you're talking about consent with horses, you're talking about boundaries with horses. Like we mentioned in the beginning, sometimes, things just have to be done. But other times, like, I will do this with valor. So, like Skylar said, right, there are so many different things you can work on with horses. If you walk into a ring saying, I'm going to work on this one specific thing and only this thing, and you get set in stone on that, you're not going to have a good training session.
No, you're setting yourself up for failure by limiting what else you can accomplish.
Well, and eliminating their input, because let's be honest, horses, just like we do, feel different day to day. So, one day they might be a little sore from acting a fool in the field overnight, or maybe they tripped on something, maybe they have an abscess. So, maybe they aren't willing to do quite the same level of activity that they were the day before.
Yeah.
So, that's something I would go back and forth with Valor when I first got him, because, whether your horse is a baby, a Mustang, and older, you're always going to be playing that game of where's your threshold, where are your boundaries, how can we get to know each other? And, with Valor, the way that started was our sessions, I would kind of go into working with him, even though he was broke, I would go into working with him and letting him kind of decide. If it didn't really seem like a ridden day, like his heart wasn't really in it, I was like, we don't need to do that. We can do this instead.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, really attributed to building a bond a lot quicker, because he realized, oh, you are going to play with me within reason. You are going to listen to me when I say I'm not really feeling this. And it's really, it's helped a bunch in just bonding and communicating with him, because he feels comfortable communicating with me. Which means when there is something wrong, I can usually pick up on it faster.
Mm-hmm.
But then you wind up with horses like Willie, who have the boundaries, the thresholds, the consent beaten out of them.
Yes.
So,
it makes it so much more challenging, especially to just communicate with him. Now that I've had him for X amount of years, I have a better idea of how to read him, and I can know and start to pick up on, okay, something is upsetting you, you're kind of reaching that threshold, dial things back or channel it into something else. But for him, he's a workaholic, essentially. He had it beaten into him that he needed to do his job, and he needed to do it perfectly and as efficiently as possible. And I don't think that's ever going to leave. I don't think that's ever going to not be how he handles situations. So I just have to accept him, and as he is, learn how to navigate those reactions to certain things.
And it's also going to make retirement more difficult, because Willie had this buildup of fluid and pressure on his spine for a short while.
Yep.
And his communication of that discomfort itself was very minimal.
No, he pushed through it. So I didn't know it was an issue until taking off his saddle and the next day seeing this welt. And I'm like, where did this come from? What is going on? Why aren't you acting ouchy, or like this is hurting you? And he was just pushing through all that pain and everything, which I love him, but it makes it very hard sometimes.
Stoic horses make life difficult. They do, for sure. And, that just goes to show, like, you have horses that have been given too loose a boundary, too loose a threshold. They have their own idea of what consent looks like, and they'll bull you over and push you over and just help themselves to anything and everything.
Yep.
But then you wind up with the other side of that extreme, which is Willie, who had none of that. No boundaries or threshold. He was expected to do what he was told and nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, when we talk about consent horses, I see those extreme sides. I don't see a whole lot of the middle ground, or at least nobody talks about it.
Yeah, the middle ground is, to me, good horsemanship.
It really
that's
is.
All it boils down to. And honestly, you can almost talk about consent in horses in parallel to parenting.
You really can. Yeah, you really can. Because, you gotta teach your kids, like, hey, you only disturb your parents when they're in these spaces of the house, or hey, you can't hit your friends just because they did something that marginally annoyed you.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a million different ways to parent. Just
there
like
really
there's
is,
a million different ways to deal with horses.
Because there's a million different personalities, and no one's the same. Because, even working with horses, I can draw similarities between personalities, right? Walker and Willie are both fairly high-strung, high-anxiety horses. But the difference is Walker will communicate with me about an issue, whereas Willie tries to push through the issue.
Yep.
And then Willie often, because of that difference there, Willie is more likely to spiral than Walker is.
Yeah, Willie gets overwhelmed very quickly. And an issue that we had in the past was he would rear. Once everything got too much for him, he would just pop up and rear. And I would have to just try to manage that and try to calm him back down and bring him back into me. And it was a feat. I will say that. But we did accomplish it. And it just took a lot of time and a lot of patience in trying to better our communication together.
And a lot of it was truly learning what his boundaries were. And his boundaries were those kinds of events, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
isn't what he wanted to do. And it's not what you wanted to do.
No, it was a situation of like, I really didn't want to be there, and he picked up on that, and he didn't want to be there either. So I don't blame him.
Right.
And yeah, we don't do that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah. And, you know, like we talked about the middle ground. So Willie is an extreme, and unfortunately that means, you know, certain things do get delayed because we don't realize it's an issue until it becomes like he does not want to wear a saddle.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, with Willie, that's what we noticed. With, you know, Sundown, what Skylar's going to have to watch, him being so young, is not giving him too much leeway that he thinks he can just
plow through.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest thing. I'm like, I cannot have a horse that will do that. I cannot create a horse that does that.
Yeah. So, you know, we sit here and we talk about consent, and it's definitely a balancing act. It truly is, because some horses require firmer boundaries than others, and some require looser boundaries. But at the end of the day, your horse has to be prepared for you to violate those boundaries.
Yes. And we don't mean that in like any weird way in
any
sense.
We don't mean that quite as aggressively as it may sound, but reality is that's what you're doing. Every time you give your horse vaccines, we don't like vaccines. Like, we as people don't like them, but it is a necessary thing we have to do to be healthy.
Mm-hmm. Same for medication or any type of vet work. You know, most horses don't want to sit there and go through that, which I don't blame them.
They don't want to be poked and prodded and have this strange lady sticking her hands in your bits. No one wants that, but it has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So as a good horse owner, as part of good horsemanship, all of these things, you have to teach your horse to, yes, here's your boundaries, here's your threshold. I see them, I hear them, I acknowledge them. But unfortunately, I also have to give you the skills necessary to deal with when those are violated.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe in preparing horses for the future, for whatever may or may not come. Ideally, yes, we would all love to keep our horses in our hands till the end of their life or our lives. But, you know, that isn't always the case. They're expensive animals. Not everybody's going to have the same mindset you are.
Exactly. And life happens too.
It really does.
Situations change, circumstances change, and possibly your horse's owner.
So, you know, while you're staying there trying to respect your horse's boundaries, also make sure they're okay with them being violated to a degree, because they will be. It is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. Because I can tell you right now, Valor having a tube shoved down his throat and a hand up his butt was probably not on his agenda or wish list, but he had to deal with that. Yeah. That was a necessary part of life-saving care for him. So he had to have the skills to handle that kind of action. So, you know, yes, I've worked with him and I do try to acknowledge his thresholds. Like, he hates sheets. He hates blankets and sheets being put on and off. It makes him squirrely. It makes him anxious. So I know going into that, I can't rush that process. It's going to make him worse. It's like Sundown and the fly spray, right? We're trying not to sour them. We're trying to acknowledge them, but it is an inevitable part of their day-to-day they have to learn to live with.
Yep.
So yeah, consent in horses, it's a rabbit hole you can go down. You can play devil's advocate one way or the other. You can bounce around all you want. At the end of the day, there's no right answer.
No, because every situation is different. Every horse and rider or pairing is different.
Right. And like I said, like, Sundown is going to grow up in a fine middle ground, but Willie was an extreme. He was given no boundaries, no threshold. He was expected to just be a robot. Yeah. Which created
the problems today.
Yeah. And, you know, I've met horses who have no boundaries. No one tells them no. No one tells them to knock it off. And those are the ones I actually find to be more dangerous, because they learn their size very, very quickly.
They learn that they can push people around and that they have control of their everything.
Yeah, and they learn they can scare you. And once a horse learns it can scare you, it is going to do everything it can, and it will continue to escalate the situation. Yep. And I have dealt with that firsthand, and it is not a fun situation to be put into. Because even if you are trying to keep everything low, the horse, believe it or not, yes, horses are capable of causing problems. The horse is escalating the situation. The horse is making the situation more dangerous and more stressful because they're not getting their way. And that's where teaching them to deal with not getting their way is important.
Yep.
And they can learn it from their herd mates, but not everybody has a good 6-horse herd to sort everything out. So we know this episode's kind of not the most fluid one we've done, but it is an important one because it is a little seed I want to plant in everybody's brain.
Just something to think about in the future, and when you come into a circumstance or situation that this kind of arises, you just think a little bit more of like, what is actually going on with my horse? What are they possibly thinking? What are they feeling? What are they conveying to me? And how can I act accordingly?
Yeah, because, every horse is going to communicate to you. You just got to be willing to listen, and you got to be willing to sit there and say, because let's be honest, people, not everybody here is going out working on a ranch. So you sit there and you say, how important is this thing that my horse is refusing to do? How important is it to do this thing right now?
Yeah.
So it's just food for thought.
Yeah.
So thanks for tuning on in.
We'll see you on the flip side. We hope you enjoyed this week's topic. Join us for new episodes every Sunday. And to keep up with the herd, be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Highline Herd and visit our website at thehighlineherd.com. We hope you enjoy the show. See you next week.